The words didn't just hang in the air. They struck me with the physical force of a backhand slap. Sloane stood in the center of my son's kitchen, the late afternoon sun catching the sequins on her wedding dress. A pristine, architectural confection of silk and lace that was currently hanging on the pantry door, steaming out before the big day. It was a dress that cost more than my first car. "The best gift," Sloane said, her voice terrifyingly light, "would be if you disappeared from our family." She smiled. It was that plastic, practiced smile I had grown to loathe over the last 3 years. The one that didn't reach her eyes, the one that said, "I am tolerating you because I have to." But today, the tolerance had evaporated. I looked at my son. Beckett was leaning against the quartz island, studying a smudge on the counter. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He nodded, a small, jerky motion, as if he were agreeing to a lunch order rather than the eviction of his mother. "You heard her," Beckett said finally, his voice devoid of warmth. "This is supposed to be our special weekend, Mom. Your negativity is ruining everything." My negativity. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked down at my hands. These were the hands that had spent the morning arranging 3 dozen hydrangeas because the florist had underdelivered. These were the hands that had spent the afternoon polishing the silverware Sloane insisted on using for the rehearsal dinner. These were the hands that had written checks until my wrist ached. "The only negative thing I've done," I said, my voice sounding eerily calm to my own ears, "was suggest that maybe we didn't need ice sculptures shaped like swans for a backyard reception." Sloane examined her manicured nails, a shade of pale pink called Blushing Bride, I recalled, because I had paid for the manicure. "It's not just the swans, Madeline, it's your whole energy, you're hovering, it's suffocating." She looked up, her expression hard. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked. Sloane shrugged, a fluid motion of indifference. "I don't know, a hotel, your sister, in Ohio. Honestly, Madeline, I don't care where you go as long as you're not here tomorrow when the guests arrive." "This is my son's house, too," I reminded her, looking at Beckett, willing him to be the man his father raised. Beckett cleared his throat, finally looking up, though he focused somewhere just above my left ear. "Actually, it's more Sloane's house now. She's been handling all the decor, the improvements. You just gave us some money once." The air left the room. Some money once. The phrase echoed in my skull, bouncing around like a trapped bird. $87,000 reduced to some money once. My mind didn't stay in that sterile, gray-and-white kitchen. It traveled back 3 years to a different kitchen. A kitchen with warm oak cabinets and a smell of lemon oil and old books. The Victorian on Elm Street. My late husband, Atticus, and I had bought that house when it was a rotting shell. We had spent 20 years bleeding into that wood. I remembered Atticus on a ladder, his face speckled with white paint, laughing as we tried to restore the crown molding. I remembered the scrape of sandpaper, the smell of sawdust, the weekends spent hunting for period-correct brass fixtures. That house wasn't just wood and brick. It was the physical manifestation of our marriage. It was where Beckett had taken his first steps. It was where I had nursed Atticus through the cancer that finally took him. When I sold it 3 years ago, I didn't just sell a building. I sold my history. I sold the ghost of my husband. I cashed out my entire life savings, the equity of 40 years, to write an $87,000 check so Beckett and Sloane could put a down payment on this dream house in a subdivision where every lawn looked exactly the same. They had cried, they had hugged me. "You'll always have a place here, Mom," Beckett had promised, tears in his eyes. "This is our home, meaning it's your home too." And now, some money once. I looked at the granite countertops I had helped choose. I looked at the custom cabinets my sacrifice had paid for. I looked at these 2 people who had taken everything I had given them, my money, my time, my love, and convinced themselves they had achieved it all on their own. That's when it happened. It wasn't a break. Breaking implies a shattering, a collapse. This was a shift. It felt mechanical, precise, like a heavy steel gear inside my chest clicking from drive into reverse. The unconditional love of a mother is a powerful force, but it is not an infinite resource. It can be mined until the vein runs dry. And looking at Beckett's weak, averted gaze, I realized the mine was empty. "You're right," I said softly. Sloane blinked, surprised. She had braced herself for tears, for pleading, for the dramatic scene she could later recount to her bridesmaids over mimosas about her difficult mother-in-law. "I should go," I continued, my voice steady. "I'll pack my things and be gone within the hour." Beckett actually let out a breath of relief. "That's probably for the best, Mom. We can talk after the honeymoon, once things settle down." Talk after the honeymoon. As if this were a disagreement about a seating chart, not an eviction. "Sure," I said, "after the honeymoon." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't stomp. I didn't slam the door. I walked with the measured pace of a stranger. I climbed the stairs to the guest room, the room that had been my residence for the past 6 months, since my apartment lease ended, and they suggested I move in to help with the wedding. It was never my asterisk room. I wasn't allowed to hang Atticus's picture on the wall because it clashed with the aesthetic. My clothes had to be kept in plastic bins under the bed because the closet was full of Sloane's winter coats. Always the guest room, because guests eventually leave. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed. As I began to fold my clothes, my sensible cardigans, the dress I was supposed to wear tomorrow, the sound of their voices drifted up through the vent. Finally, Sloane's voice was muffled but audible. "God, the energy is already lighter." "I know," Beckett replied. "I feel bad, but she just doesn't get it." "We should measure this room next week," Sloane said, her voice brightening. "Once she's actually gone, it's going to make such a perfect yoga studio. The light in the morning is amazing." "I was thinking maybe an office," Beckett countered. "I need a space for my gaming setup." "We can compromise," Sloane laughed, a genuine laugh. I froze, a silk blouse in my hands. They weren't just asking me to leave for the weekend. They were already erasing me. They had been planning this. They were just waiting for the check to clear for the wedding vendors before they cut the final string. I looked at the small framed photo of Atticus on the nightstand, the only personal item I kept out. He was smiling, that crooked, confident smile that used to make me feel like I could handle anything. 43 years of marriage, I thought, and you never once made me feel unwanted in my own home. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I whispered to the photograph. "I'm not going down without a fight." I zipped the suitcase. It made a harsh, rasping sound in the quiet room. I didn't bother making the bed. I took my bag, my purse, and Atticus's photo, and I walked out. I passed the kitchen on my way to the front door. They were already opening a bottle of champagne. I heard the pop of the cork as I stepped out into the humid Virginia evening. I sat in my sedan, a 10-year-old Toyota that needed new brakes I couldn't afford because I had paid for the wedding band, and just breathed. I was parked in the driveway of the house my money had bought, the house that was now, apparently, Sloane. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from a rage so cold it burned. I needed to think. I needed a plan. But first, I needed to know exactly how deep the knife had gone. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. It was Saturday evening, nearly 7:00 p.m. The chances of an answer were slim. "This is Ophelia Vance." The voice was crisp, professional, and startlingly alert. "Ophelia," I said, my voice cracking slightly before I firmed it up. "It's Madeline Sinclair." There was a pause, the sound of a chair shifting. "Madeline, it's been a while. Is everything all right? It's Saturday night." "No," I said, staring at the front window of the house where shadows moved in the warm light. "No, everything is not all right. I need you to pull the documentation on the house purchase. The Sinclair Kensington property on Oak Ridge Drive." "Has something happened with Beckett and Sloane?" "I need to know where I stand," I said, ignoring the question. "They've asked me to leave, permanently. They claimed I just gave them some money once and have no rights to the property." Ophelia didn't gasp. She didn't offer platitudes. She went silent. I could hear the rapid-fire click of a keyboard. "Madeline," Ophelia said slowly, "I've been worried about this since the closing. I tried to warn you about the way they were treating your investment as a gift rather than what it actually was." "What do you mean, what it actually was?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I gave them the check, I thought." "You didn't just give them a check," Ophelia interrupted, her voice gaining an edge of steel. "Do you remember the additional addendums I insisted on? The ones you signed after you expressed concern about Sloane's credit card debt?" I frowned, racking my brain. The closing had been a blur of paperwork, smiling realtors, and Beckett's gratitude. Ophelia had been fierce, insisting on protections I had thought were unnecessary at the time. I had signed whatever she put in front of me, just wanting to make my son happy. I remember signing a lot of things," I stammered. "Honey," Ophelia's voice dropped an octave, shifting from lawyer to confidant. "The $87,000 wasn't a gift letter. Legally, we structured it as a capital contribution. Your name is on the deed as a tenant in common." I gripped the steering wheel. "But," Sloane said. "Sloane never signed the waiver forms I sent over," Ophelia said, and I could practically hear the shark-like grin through the phone. "She kept forgetting to return them. She was so busy planning the engagement party, remember? And since she never signed the waiver acknowledging the money as a gift, and you are listed on the deed." "What are you saying, Ophelia?" Through the living room window, I saw Sloane hold up her glass of champagne, toasting to the ceiling, to her future, to my absence. She looked radiant and triumphant. She had no idea who was sitting in the dark driveway. "I'm saying," Ophelia said, savoring the words, "that in the eyes of the Commonwealth of Virginia, you aren't a guest. You own 35% of that house." The world stopped spinning. The air in the car suddenly felt crisp, oxygen-rich. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "Dead serious. The mortgage company has you as a co-borrower to secure the rate, and the deed reflects your equity stake. It is completely legal, binding, and irrevocable without your signature." I looked at the house again. It didn't look like a fortress of exclusion anymore. It looked like an asset. "Ophelia," I said, my voice steadying, growing stronger with every syllable. "Hypothetically speaking, what would happen if I wanted to sell my share of the house?" "Well," Ophelia said, "as a co-owner, you have every right to force a partition sale. The other owners, Beckett and Sloane, would have the first right of refusal. They could buy you out at current market value. And if they couldn't afford to buy me out, then the house goes on the market," Ophelia said simply, "and the proceeds are split according to ownership percentages." I watched Beckett walk into the living room. He wrapped his arms around Sloane's waist. They looked like a magazine ad for domestic bliss. They looked like people who believed they had won. "Ophelia," I said, "I need you to prepare a notice of intent to sell. I want it delivered first thing Monday morning." "Madeline," Ophelia cautioned, though she didn't sound like she wanted to stop me. "Are you sure? Once we start this process, it's a bell that can't be unrung. It's scorched earth." I looked at the packed suitcase in my passenger seat. I thought about the yoga studio. I thought about some money once. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "They want me to disappear. Fine, but I'm taking my 35% with me. I'll have the courier there by 9:00 a.m. on Monday," Ophelia said. I hung up the phone. I sat in the growing darkness for another minute, watching the house. My sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my silence for stupidity. But the night wasn't over. I had one more call to make. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Sunset Gardens Country Club. "Sunset Gardens, this is Cassidy. How can I help you?" "Hi, Cassidy," I said, my voice bright and pleasant. "This is Madeline Sinclair. I need to speak with you about tomorrow's wedding reception." It was time to disappear, and I was going to make sure my absence was the loudest thing in the room. "Oh, Mrs. Sinclair, how exciting! The big day is less than 24 hours away." Cassidy's voice chirped through the Bluetooth speakers of my sedan, oblivious to the fact that I was currently idling in a dark driveway, watching my son celebrate my eviction. "Is this about the table runners? because I managed to source that specific shade of oyster pearl Sloane wanted. No, Cassidy, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the motherly warmth I usually reserved for the young woman who had spent the last 6 months mediating Sloane's tantrums. It's not about the runners. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. A change of plans? The chirping faltered slightly. Ma'am, the kitchen is already prepping the mise en place for the filet. The staff is scheduled, unless it's a medical emergency. It's a financial one, I interrupted. I need to cancel the reception. Silence, the kind of heavy, confused silence that usually precedes a panic attack. Cancel, Cassidy laughed nervously. You mean postpone, or perhaps move the time. I mean cancel, Cassidy. As in cease operations, pull the plug, I want the event called off. But, Mrs. Sinclair, the wedding is tomorrow. We have 200 guests expecting a 5-course meal, an open bar, and a live jazz quartet. The cancellation fees alone will be. I am fully aware of the contract terms, I said, cutting her off. I wasn't the doting mother anymore. I was the woman who had managed a household budget through 3 recessions and a husband's terminal illness. I know I will forfeit the deposit. I am also prepared to pay the late cancellation penalty. However, I am not prepared to pay for the event itself. I don't understand, Cassidy stammered. I could hear the rustling of papers in the background. Let me check the file. Yes, the contract is under your name, Madeline Sinclair, with your visa ending in 4098. But surely you want me to speak with the bride and groom first? Sloane will be devastated. I looked through the windshield. Sloane was now twirling in the living room, her silhouette framed by the bay window, laughing at something Beckett had said. She didn't look devastated. She looked like a queen who had just successfully beheaded a rival. There is no need to disturb them, I said, my tone hardening into something jagged. I am making an executive decision. The happy couple has made it very clear that my involvement in their lives is no longer welcome. In fact, they specifically requested that I disappear. I am simply honoring their wishes. Mrs. Sinclair, with all due respect, this seems like a family matter that should be resolved before we dismantle an event of this magnitude. It is a business matter, Cassidy. You have a contract with *me*. My credit card is the only one on file. I am instructing you as the client to terminate the services. If a single bottle of champagne is opened on my dime tomorrow, I will dispute the charge with my bank as unauthorized. Do I make myself clear? The chirping bird was gone. In its place was a stunned service worker realizing she was standing on a fault line. Crystal clear, Mrs. Sinclair. I'll inform the catering manager. Thank you, and Cassidy, please send the final bill for the cancellation fees to the Hampton Inn on Executive Boulevard. I won't be at the house to receive mail. I ended the call. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from a strange, intoxicating rush of adrenaline. For 3 years, I had been the doormat. The nice one. The one who kept the peace while they picked my pockets. Reclaiming my agency felt terrifying. It also felt like taking my first deep breath in years. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I didn't look back at the house. I drove through the subdivision, past the manicured lawns and the welcome home flags, merging onto the highway toward the other side of town. 20 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of the Hampton Inn. It wasn't the Ritz, but the air smelled of lemon polish and neutral sanitizer, a scent I found infinitely preferable to the cloying vanilla candles Sloane burned to mask the smell of the dog she refused to train. Checking in, the young man at the desk asked. Yes, a room for, let's say a week, for now. I handed over my credit card, the same one that was supposed to pay for tomorrow's lobster bisque. Room 314 was standard. Beige walls, a firm mattress, a generic abstract painting of a sailboat. To me, it looked like a sanctuary. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and latched the safety bar. I sat on the edge of the bed. The silence was profound. No television blaring Beckett's video games. No Sloane complaining about the housekeeper she couldn't afford. No passive-aggressive comments about my shoes being left in the wrong spot. I picked up the room service menu. It was 8:30 p.m. "This is room service," a voice answered. "I'd like a cheeseburger," I said, "with fries and a slice of chocolate cake, and do you have a bottle of Pinot Noir?" "We do." "Send the whole bottle." I ate dinner sitting in the armchair by the window, watching the headlights of cars on the interstate. I ate with my fingers. I got ketchup on my chin and didn't rush to wipe it off. I drank 2 glasses of wine and felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with alcohol. It was the warmth of autonomy. I was just drifting off to sleep. The TV muted on an old rerun of Golden Girls when my phone on the nightstand lit up. 11:47 p.m. The screen flashed, BCKTT mobile. I stared at it. The buzzing was violent against the wooden table. I let it ring 4 times. 5. Then I reached out and swiped the green button, putting it on speaker. "Hello." "What did you do?" The scream was so loud I winced. It wasn't Beckett. It was Sloane. Her voice was unrecognizable, a guttural, jagged screech that sounded like metal tearing. "I honored your request," I said calmly, leaning back against the pillows. "You wanted me to disappear, so I disappeared." "The country club called," Sloane shrieked. "Cassidy called my cell phone at 11 o'clock at night. She said you canceled our reception." "Dorothy, Mom!" Beckett's voice broke in, wrestling the phone away. He sounded breathless, panic radiating through the connection. "Mom, this is insane. You can't just cancel our wedding because you're upset about sleeping arrangements." "I didn't cancel your wedding, Beckett," I corrected him, swirling the last sip of wine in my glass. "You can still get married. The church is free. The officiant is already paid. I just canceled the party I was paying for." "There are 200 people expecting dinner tomorrow," Sloane yelled from the background. "My cousins are flying in from San Diego, the photographer, the band. Did you cancel the band?" "I canceled everything on the contract, Sloane." "Which was everything?" You vindictive bitch." "Sloane," Beckett snapped, though his defense of me was weak at best. "Mom, listen to me. You have to fix this. Call them back. Tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "It was a fiscal decision." "Fiscal decision?" Beckett laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "You're ruining the most important day of our lives over money. You have plenty of money. You've always said you wanted to help us." Something inside me hardened into diamond. "I have plenty of money," I repeated quietly. "Let's talk about that." "We don't have time for a lecture," Sloane wailed. "We need the venue." "No," I said, my voice cutting through their noise like a scalpel. "You need to listen. For once in your entitled lives, you are going to listen." I sat up straighter in the hotel bed. "Do you know how much that reception was costing me, Beckett? Did you ever bother to ask? Or did you just taste the cake samples and point at the most expensive tier?" Silence. $14,000, I said. "For one night. The floral arrangements, those white hydrangeas Sloane insisted had to be imported from Holland, were $3,000 alone. The jazz quartet, $2,000. The open bar with the top shelf liquor because Sloane's friends don't drink well drinks, $4,000. We didn't know it was that much," Beckett stammered. "You didn't know because you didn't care," I snapped. "You thought the money just materialized. You thought because I'm your mother, my resources are infinite and my needs are non-existent. You thought you could treat me like a nuisance in the morning and bankroll your fairy tale in the evening." "We were stressed," Sloane sobbed. It was a crying jag I recognized, the weaponized tears she used to get her way. "I didn't mean it when I said disappear. I was just overwhelmed. How could you do this to us? We trusted you." "Trusted me?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You literally told me the best gift I could give your family was to vanish. I am simply complying with your request." "I didn't mean forever," Sloane wailed. "I just meant for the weekend." "Ah, I see. So I was supposed to psychically understand that permanently actually meant temporarily." "Mom, please." Beckett tried a different angle, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. This is financial abuse. You're using your money to control us, to punish us. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and gross. Financial abuse. No, Beckett, I said, feeling the truth of the words settle in my bones. Financial abuse is what you two have been doing to me for 3 years. That's ridiculous, he spat. Is it? You've conditioned me to believe that my only value to this family is monetary. You've trained me to expect crumbs of affection only when I write a check. You've made me feel guilty for having needs, for taking up space, for existing in a house my life savings paid for. I took a breath. I bought you groceries because you were short, and then watched you buy a new gaming console the next day. I paid your car insurance because you forgot, and then watched Sloane come home with designer handbags. That is financial abuse, Beckett. I'm just cutting off the supply. We'll be the laughing stock of the town, Sloane whimpered. Everyone will think we're broke. Well, I said, letting the silence stretch. Now that you mention it, without my support, you probably are broke. Have you looked at your household budget lately? Do you know what your mortgage payment is without my contribution? We can pay the mortgage, Beckett shouted, though his voice cracked. We'll see, I said. The line went quiet. I could hear them breathing, ragged, panicked breaths. They were finally realizing that the ATM had not only stopped dispensing cash, but had also walked away. What do you want, Mom? Beckett asked finally. His voice was defeated, small. Just tell us what you want to fix this. It was the question I had been waiting for, but the answer had changed. Yesterday, I might have wanted an apology. I might have wanted a hug. I might have wanted to be told I was loved. Now, I want exactly what you offered me in the kitchen, Beckett, I said, looking at the generic sailboat painting. I want to disappear from your family permanently, and I want to take my money with me when I go. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up the phone, turned it off, and placed it face down on the nightstand. I laid back in the dark hotel room, pulling the crisp, cool duvet up to my chin. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worried about whether the air conditioning was too loud for Sloane, or if my footsteps were disturbing Beckett. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be a war, but tonight I slept like a baby. Sunday morning broke over the city with an aggressive cheerfulness that felt almost mocking. The sky was a piercing, unblemished blue, the kind of weather brides pray for and photographers covet. Inside room 314 of the Hampton Inn, however, the atmosphere was hermetically sealed and meticulously calm. I sat at the small, wobbly round table by the window, a crisp white napkin spread over my lap. Room service had delivered breakfast at 8:00 a.m. sharp. Scrambled eggs, rye toast, bacon burned just the way I liked it, and a pot of coffee that was surprisingly robust. My phone, currently face down on the nightstand, had been vibrating incessantly since 6:00 a.m. I had counted 37 missed calls and 41 text messages before I finally turned the ringer off entirely. I buttered my toast, taking a deliberate, crunchy bite. I imagined the scene at the house on Oak Ridge Drive. By now, the hair and makeup team would have arrived. Sloane would be in the chair, likely puffy-eyed from a night of screaming, demanding concealer for her stress blotches. The bridesmaids, 3 girls Sloane had met in her sorority who terrified me with their collective vocal fry, would be whispering in the hallway. And Beckett would be packing. At 9:15 a.m., the knocking started. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a frantic, rhythmic pounding that shook the hollow corridor in its frame. Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the bitterness before I stood up. I checked my reflection in the mirror, hair neatly brushed, wearing a fresh blouse and slacks I had packed. I looked like a woman ready for a business meeting, not a wedding guest. I undid the safety latch and opened the door. Beckett stood in the hallway, and he looked like a shipwreck. He was still wearing his tuxedo shirt from the night before, but it was unbuttoned at the collar, the pleats crushed and stained with what looked like red wine. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark, bruised circles of exhaustion. He hadn't shaved, and the stubble on his jaw made him look 10 years older and 12 years younger all at once. "Mom," he breathed, pushing past me into the room without an invitation. The smell of stale alcohol and anxiety trailed behind him. "We need to talk." I left the door open a crack, a subconscious safety measure, and turned to face him. "Shouldn't you be getting ready, Beckett? The ceremony is at 2. You have guests arriving." "That's what I need to talk to you about?" He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture he'd inherited from his father, though Atticus only did it when he was solving a problem, not creating one. "Sloane is having a breakdown. She's locked herself in the bathroom. Her mother is threatening to fly back to California. The whole thing is falling apart." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, leaning against the dresser. "I hope you work it out." "Work it out?" He stared at me, his mouth hanging open. "Mom, you destroyed our wedding." "No, son," I corrected him, keeping my voice low and level. "I removed my financial support from your reception. There is a difference. You are still getting married. You just aren't getting the party you couldn't afford." "This is insane," he muttered, packing the small length of the hotel room, kicking at the pattern on the carpet. "Over what? A misunderstanding, a fight about sleeping arrangements." "Sit down, Beckett." Something in my tone, the voice I used when he was 7 and had broken a neighbor's window, made him obey. He collapsed into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. I remained standing, looking down at my 42-year-old son, who was finally starting to understand that the laws of physics applied to him. For every action, there is a reaction. "This isn't about sleeping arrangements," I said. "This is about respect. This is about gratitude. This is about treating the person who made your lifestyle possible like a human being instead of a limitless resource." He looked up, his eyes wet. "We've always treated you well. We invite you over for dinner. We let you stay with us." "Have you?" I crossed my arms. "Let's examine that, shall we? When was the last time you asked about my life, Beckett? Not about my bank account, or if I could babysit the dog, or if I could pick up a package. When did you last ask how I was coping with being a widow, or what book I'm reading?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "I'll wait," I said. "Nothing." "When was the last time you remembered my birthday without Facebook reminding you?" I pressed. "When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of your personal ATM?" "That's not fair," he whispered. "You know we've been struggling, the house. It costs a lot to maintain." "Let's talk about the cost," I said, moving to the desk where I had laid out my notebook. I opened it to the page where I had been tallying the figures since dawn. "In the past year alone, Beckett, how much money have I given you and Sloane?" He shifted in the chair. "I don't know, a few thousand, for emergencies." $37,000, I said. His head snapped up. "What? No, that's impossible." "Is it?" I ran my finger down the list. "Let's review the receipts. Last August, the transmission on your Audi blew out. Who paid the $4,200 repair bill because you needed the car for work?" He flinched. "You offered." "I offered because you were crying in my kitchen about losing your job." "October," I continued. "Sloane's credit card was maxed out and she was hysterical about the interest rate. I paid off the $6,500 balance. December. You wanted to host Christmas but couldn't afford the catering or the decorations. That was $3,000, and let's not forget the groceries. Every time I go to Whole Foods with Sloane, she fills the cart with $80 bottles of wine and organic steaks, and somehow her wallet is always in the car. That averages $400 a month." I looked at him. "Add in the utility bills I pay online because you're always a little short in the winter. The vet bills for the dog. The landscaping crew because you refuse to mow your own lawn. It is $37,000, Beckett. That is more than some people earn in a year. And that is asterisk on top of the $87,000 down payment." "That's $124,000, I said, the number hanging in the air between us like a guillotine blade. "And what do I get in return? I get told to disappear. I get treated like a servant in a home I paid for." We were always planning to pay you back," he stammered, his face pale. "Were you?" I asked softly. Because I saw Sloane's browser history on the iPad. She's been looking at honeymoon packages to the Maldives, $15,000 packages. You weren't planning to pay me back, Beckett. You were planning to bleed me dry until I died, and then complain about the inheritance tax. He slumped forward, elbows on his knees, head hanging low. What do you want from me, Mom? I can't undo what Sloane said. She can be difficult, I know that, but she's my wife. And I respect that, I said. But you need to respect that I am done financing her difficulty. I want you to understand that kindness is not weakness. And I want you to understand that when you treat the donor badly enough, the charity closes. So you're punishing us, he said, his voice hardening slightly. You're ruining our wedding day to teach us a lesson. No, I said. I am protecting myself. I am stopping a pattern of financial abuse. Financial abuse? He stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. Stop saying that, it's ridiculous. We're your family. You have conditioned me to believe my money is the only reason you keep me around, I said, stepping into his space. Yesterday, you agreed with your wife that I should vanish. You stood there and nodded. You threw me out. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. And now you are going to get exactly what you asked for. I walked back to the window. You better figure out how to pay for your own lifestyle, Beckett, and you better start looking for apartments, because the house situation is about to get very complicated. He froze. What are you talking about? I turned to face him, a small, sad smile playing on my lips. I'm talking about the legal documents you never bothered to read. The ones Ophelia Vance drew up when I handed over my life savings. The house is ours, he said, but his voice wavered. We bought it. The deed is in our name. Is it? I picked up my phone and opened the email Ophelia had sent me at midnight. Actually, the deed lists 3 owners, Beckett Sinclair, Sloane Kensington, and Madeline Sinclair, as tenants in common. The color didn't just drain from his face, it vanished, leaving him looking gray and sick. That can't be right, Sloane said. Sloane never signed the gift letter, I interrupted. She kept forgetting, or maybe she thought she was being clever, but because she didn't sign it, that $87,000 wasn't a gift. It was a capital contribution. Legally, I own 35% of your house. Beckett stared at me like I had just spoken in tongues. He looked around the room as if searching for a hidden camera. You own part of our house. Yes, and since the environment has become hostile, I have instructed Ophelia to file a partition action. I am forcing a sale, Beckett. You can't do that, he whispered. We live there. I can, and I am, unless you can buy me out. Buy you out, he laughed, a choked, hysterical sound. The house appraised at $310,000 last month. 35% of that is over $100,000, I finished for him. I know, I'm good at math. That's why I have money and you two have debt. He looked like he was going to vomit. We don't have $100,000, Mom. We don't have $10,000. We just spent everything on the wedding deposits. Then the house goes on the market, I said simply, and you move into something you can actually afford. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a fantasy world shattering against the hard rocks of reality. Beckett looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. He didn't see his doormat mother. He saw a stranger with a calculator and a lawyer. The hotel room phone rang, loud and jarring. I let it ring twice before picking it up. Beckett watched me, paralyzed. Hello. Mrs. Sinclair. It was Cassidy from Sunset Gardens. Her voice was breathless. I'm so glad I caught you. I have Mrs. Kensington, the bride's mother, on the other line. She's hysterical, but she's offering to pay. I glanced at Beckett. His eyes lit up with desperate hope. He had heard the tone of the conversation. She says she will wire the full amount for the reception immediately, Cassidy continued. She wants to reinstate the event. She says she'll cover the rush fees, the overtime, everything. Can we proceed? Beckett stepped forward, mouthing the word please. Mom, let her pay, please. It fixes everything. I looked at my son. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about the money. He thought if someone else wrote the check, the problem would vanish. He was ready to trade one enabler for another. "That is very generous of her, Cassidy," I said into the phone, my voice cool. "But I'm afraid that won't be possible." Beckett's face crumpled. "You see," I continued, holding my son's gaze, "there are some family dynamics at play here that make it inappropriate for me to accept payment from a third party for an event I chose to cancel. The contract is in my name. I do not authorize anyone else to take it over." I understand," Cassidy said, sounding confused and terrified. "Should I tell Mrs. Kensington the cancellation stands?" "Yes, please, and Cassidy, do not call me again." I hung up. "Why?" Beckett whispered. "Why would you do that? Genevieve has the money, she could have saved us." "Because you need to learn that you can't just find a new person to pay for your mistakes," I said. "Sloane's mother has been enabling her just as long as I've been enabling you. It stops today." Beckett stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly. The fight had gone out of him. He looked small, defeated. "I have to go," he said, his voice hollow. I have to tell Sloane." "Go ahead," I said, "but Beckett." He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. He didn't look back. "When you talk to your wife about our new arrangement regarding the house, make sure she understands something." He turned his head slightly. "I am not the same woman who walked out of your kitchen last night," I said. "That woman was desperate to keep the peace at any cost. This woman is done being a victim." "You're really going to make us sell our home?" he asked, a tear finally tracking through the stubble on his cheek. "I am going to exercise my legal rights," I said. "What happens next is entirely up to you." He opened the door and walked out into the bright, unforgiving hallway. I watched the door click shut. My coffee was cold. My toast was hard. But as I sat back down at the wobbly table, I realized I had never tasted a better breakfast in my life. The wedding was in 4 hours, and for the first time in history, the groom was going to be the one crying at the altar. By 4:00 p.m., my phone had stopped ringing, mostly because I had blocked Beckett and Sloane's numbers after the 45th attempt. Instead, I was sitting in the hotel restaurant, a quiet, dimly lit space with plush velvet banquettes and the gentle clinking of silverware, enjoying a late lunch of grilled salmon and asparagus. On the television above the bar, the local news was running a fluff piece about a charity dog wash. They hadn't picked up the story of the disastrous non-wedding at Sunset Gardens, though I imagined the social media fallout was already catastrophic. I took a sip of iced tea, feeling a strange, hollow sort of peace. "Excuse me, aren't you Madeline Sinclair?" I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. I looked up to see a woman standing by my table. She was about my age, perhaps a few years younger, with perfectly coiffed silver hair, a Chanel suit that cost more than my car, and eyes that held a profound, exhausted sadness. It took me a moment to place her. We had only met twice, once at the engagement party where she had been visibly tipsy, and once at the bridal shower where she had been suspiciously quiet. "Genevieve," I said, setting down my fork. "Genevieve Kensington." "May I?" She gestured to the empty chair opposite me. I dabbed my mouth with my napkin. "This should be interesting, please." Genevieve sat down with the practiced grace of a woman who had spent decades navigating country club politics and boardrooms. She signaled the waiter for a coffee, black, before turning her gaze back to me. "I wanted to thank you," she said. That wasn't what I had expected. I had braced myself for a drink in the face, or a lawsuit threat, or a mother's rage. "Thank me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I ruined your daughter's wedding day. I assumed you were the one who offered to pay for the reception this morning." "I did offer," Genevieve admitted, her voice low. "Not because I support Sloane's behavior, but because I felt a sense of obligation to the 200 guests who traveled here. But you were right to refuse, Madeline." I realized that the moment I hung up the phone. The waiter arrived with her coffee. She took a long, stabilizing sip. "I've been worried about Sloane for years," she continued, staring into the dark liquid. "The entitlement, the way she treats service staff, The way she treats asterisk us asterisk. Her father, rest his soul, spoiled her rotten. He couldn't say no to her. And I was the enabler who smoothed everything over. I studied her. Beneath the expensive makeup and the diamond studs, I saw a mirror image of myself. Another mother who had given too much and received nothing but demands in return. I kept hoping marriage would mature her, Genevieve said, looking up at me. I thought Beckett was a grounding influence, but now I see she's just turned him into another version of herself. And watching how she treated you, the woman who literally put a roof over their heads, I was horrified. They told me to disappear, I said simply. So I did. Good for you, Genevieve said, and the ferocity in her voice surprised me. Can I tell you something, Madeline? Something Sloane doesn't know yet. I nodded. She called me an hour ago, hysterical. Not about the wedding, about the house. She told me you were threatening to sell your share. She demanded, demanded, that I wire them $105,000 immediately to buy you out. My grip tightened on my glass, and Genevieve smiled, but it was a sad, tired thing. I told her absolutely not. I told her that if she wanted to own a house, she should have treated the co-owner with basic human decency. I told her the bank of mommy is closed. I felt a sudden rush of camaraderie with this woman I barely knew. She must have taken that well. She threw the phone across the room. I heard it hit the wall before the line went dead. Genevieve reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I'm flying back to California tomorrow. I can't watch them implode, and I refuse to fix it. But if you ever want to talk to someone who understands what it's like to love a child you don't particularly like right now, call me. I might just do that, I said, taking the card. Whatever your endgame is, Genevieve said, standing up to leave. Don't cushion the fall, Madeline. Let them hit the bottom. It's the only way they'll ever learn to stand up. After she left, I sat alone with my thoughts. Endgame. The word cycled through my mind. I hadn't really decided on one. I had been reacting, parrying blows, setting boundaries. But now I needed a strategy. The nuclear option was forcing the sale. Beckett and Sloane would lose the house. They'd have to rent a cramped apartment. They'd lose their status in the neighborhood. It would be justice, pure and simple. The mercy option was offering to sell them my share for what I put in $87,000 and setting up a payment plan. It would be painful for them, but they'd keep their home. The spite option was holding on to my ownership indefinitely, refusing to sell, blocking any refinancing they tried to do, and showing up once a month to inspect my property just to watch them squirm. As I signaled for the check, my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen, expecting Beckett or Sloane, ready to send it to voicemail. But the caller ID didn't say son. It said *unknown number*. I hesitated, then swiped to answer. Hello. Mrs. Madeline Sinclair, a male voice, deep, authoritative, professional. Speaking. This is Detective Silas Mercer with the Virginia Beach Police Department. I'm calling regarding a report we received this afternoon concerning your welfare. My blood went cold. The restaurant noise seemed to fade into a dull buzz. My welfare? I don't understand. We received a call from a family member claiming that you may be experiencing a cognitive decline, the detective continued, his tone neutral but serious. They alleged that you are being financially exploited by third parties and that you have been acting erratically, disappearing, making large, uncharacteristic financial decisions, cutting off contact. They requested a welfare check. I sat very still. Cognitive decline. Acting erratically. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. Beckett and Sloane realized they couldn't bully me, so they were trying to invalidate me. If they could prove I was incompetent, they could challenge my decisions. They could maybe even get power of attorney. Those manipulative, desperate little snakes. Detective Mercer, I said, my voice ice-cold and razor-sharp. I can assure you that I am in full possession of my mental faculties. In fact, I am probably thinking more clearly today than I have in the last 3 years. That's good to hear, ma'am. However, given the nature of the allegations, specifically the financial exploitation, we are required to follow up. Would you be available to meet with me, just to clear this up? I looked around the hotel restaurant at the normal people living their normal lives, unaware of the war being waged over a phone line. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. My son hadn't just kicked me out, he had tried to strip me of my mind. Absolutely, detective, I said. In fact, I have quite a lot I'd like to discuss with you about financial exploitation, just not the kind my family reported. Oh. I can be at the station tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m., and I will be bringing documentation. I'll see you then, Mrs. Sinclair. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the fight. If Beckett and Sloan wanted to play hardball, if they wanted to involve the law, I was more than ready to step up to the plate. Monday morning at the Virginia Beach Police Precinct was a bustle of activity. Phones rang, radios chattered, and officers moved with purposeful strides. I sat in a plastic chair in the waiting area, dressed in my best navy blazer, a leather portfolio resting on my knees. Mrs. Sinclair. Detective Silas Mercer was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with intelligent eyes and the kind of patient demeanor that likely served him well in domestic disputes. He beckoned me into a small, glass-walled office. "Thank you for coming in," he said, closing the door. "I want to start by saying that the person who called your son, Beckett, seemed genuinely concerned. He claimed you emptied a bank account and vanished." "I'm sure he sounded concerned," I said dryly, opening my portfolio. "My son is very good at sounding concerned when his lifestyle is threatened, and I didn't vanish. I checked into the Hampton Inn because I was evicted from my home." Detective Mercer raised an eyebrow. "Evicted?" "Let's start with the finances," I said, spreading my bank statements across his desk. I had spent the night highlighting every single transfer to Beckett or Sloan in bright yellow. The pages looked like a canary had exploded on them. "Detective, the report claimed *I was being financially exploited by strangers. The truth is, I have been systematically drained by my family." I pointed to the columns. "In the past 3 years, I have given my son and his wife $124,000. Here are the wire transfers for the car repairs. Here are the credit card payoffs. Here is the check for the down payment on the house they live in." Mercer picked up the sheets, his eyes scanning the highlighted figures. He frowned. "This is substantial." "It is," I agreed. "And yesterday, when I finally set a boundary, when I refused to pay an additional $14,000 for a wedding reception after they told me to disappear from their lives, they decided I must be senile." I pulled out my phone. "I'd like you to hear a voicemail my daughter-in-law left me at 3:00 a.m. on Saturday." I pressed play. Sloane's voice, slurring slightly from alcohol and rage, filled the small office. "Dorothy, Madeline, whatever, you are sick. You are a sick, vindictive old woman. Normal people don't do this. We're going to get help for you, whether you want it or not. Michael, Beckett thinks you're having a breakdown. You can't just steal our reception money. That's our money." The recording ended. "Does that sound like a concerned relative?" I asked. "Or does that sound like a woman who is angry that the tap has run dry?" Mercer leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. He looked from the bank statements to me. "And the house situation. My lawyer, Ophelia Vance, can verify that I am a legal 35% owner of the property at 42 Oak Ridge Drive," I said, handing him the copy of the deed Ophelia had messengered to the hotel. "Everything I am doing is within my legal rights as an investor protecting her asset." We talked for another 20 minutes. Detective Mercer was thorough. He asked about my medical history, my current living arrangements, my plans for the future. I answered every question with crisp, undeniable clarity. By the end, the tension in his shoulders had relaxed. He gathered the papers and handed them back to me. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, "I'm going to close this case as unfounded. It's clear there is no cognitive decline here, and certainly no exploitation by third parties." "Thank you, Detective." However, he added, his voice lowering, I do want to give you a pamphlet on elder financial abuse resources, just in case you want to pursue other avenues regarding those bank transfers. I took the pamphlet, tucking it into my bag. I think I have the situation well in hand now, detective, but I appreciate the backup. I walked out of the police station into the bright sunlight. The air smelled of exhaust and ocean salt. I felt lighter than I had in years. They had tried to use the system to crush me, to label me as incompetent so they could control me. Instead, they had handed me the ultimate weapon, official verification of my sanity and their greed. As I unlocked my car, my phone rang. It was Beckett. I answered on the first ring. Mom, his voice was tight, anxious. The police called. They said they closed the case. They said they're not pursuing the welfare check. That's because I'm not the one being financially abused in this relationship, sweetheart, I said, starting the engine. What did you tell them? I showed them the receipts, Beckett, all of them. The detective was very interested in the $124,000 I've gifted you over the years. He found Sloane's voicemail particularly illuminating regarding her motive. A long, heavy pause. Are you threatening us? I'm informing you that your manipulation tactics aren't working anymore. You tried to have me declared incompetent because you were scared of losing the house. That was a mistake. Mom, please, he cracked. We were just scared. Can we just sit down and talk about this like adults? No lawyers, no police. We can talk, I said, pulling out of the parking lot. But not at the house, and not without legal counsel. What? I want a meeting. Tomorrow, 2:00 p.m., at Ophelia Vance's office on Main Street. Mom, we can't afford a lawyer. Then I suggest you show up alone and ready to listen. Bring Sloane, and bring a realistic proposal for how you are going to handle the house situation. A proposal. I own 35% of an asset worth over $300,000, Beckett. That is my retirement security. You either buy me out or we sell. Those are your options. And after that stunt with the police, the price of my mercy just went up. I hung up before he could respond. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like a CEO who had just survived a hostile takeover attempt and was now ready to restructure the company. I drove toward Ophelia's office to prep for tomorrow. The time for being mom was over. It was time to be a majority shareholder. Ophelia Vance's law office was designed to make you feel small. It was a cathedral of jurisprudence, situated on the top floor of the Dominion Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked down upon the city like a judgment from on high. The room smelled of lemon oil, old leather, and billable hours. I sat at the head of the massive mahogany conference table, flanked by Ophelia. She was wearing a pinstriped suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass, her silver pen hovering over a stack of legal documents like a weapon. The clock on the wall ticked. 2:00 p.m., 2:05 p.m., 2:12 p.m. They're late, Ophelia noted, checking her Rolex. It's a power play or incompetence. With them, it's hard to tell. It's fear, I said, sipping my water. They know what this room represents. At 2:15 p.m., the heavy oak doors opened. The receptionist, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, ushered them in. Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, he murmured, then fled. Beckett and Sloane walked in, and the power play theory evaporated instantly. They looked like refugees from a natural disaster. Beckett's eyes were sunken, his posture slumped as if his spine had been removed. But it was Slunna who shocked me. Gone was the immaculately groomed socialite. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy, careless bun. She wore no makeup, revealing splotchy, red-rimmed eyes and pale skin. She was wearing sweatpants, expensive ones, likely Lululemon, but sweatpants nonetheless, and a hoodie. She looked small. She looked young. She looked terrified. Sit, Ophelia said. It wasn't a suggestion. They pulled out the heavy leather chairs opposite us. The expanse of the table felt like a demilitarized zone. Dorothy, Muddlepen, Slunna started immediately, her voice cracking. She gripped her hands together on the table, knuckles white. I owe you an enormous apology. I was stressed. I was overwhelmed with the wedding planning. I said things I didn't mean. I watched her. A part of me, the mother part, wanted to reach across the table and offer a tissue. The other part, the majority shareholder part, remained frozen. Thank you, I said evenly. That is a start. Slunna blinked, clearly expecting more. She expected me to say, it's okay, sweetie, Ustarusk, or I forgive you. She expected the instant absolution I had provided for 3 years. When the silence stretched, Uffala cleared her throat. The sound was like a gavel strike. Let's review the facts, Uffala said, opening the file folder in front of her. 3 years ago, Mrs. Sunkla provided $87,000 for the down payment on the property at 42 Oak Ridge Drive. The mortgage documents list her as a co-borrower. The deed lists her as a tenant in common with a 35% ownership stake. Beckett stared at the papers as if they might bite him. We had no idea, he whispered. We thought it was just help. You would have known, Uffala replied, her voice crisp and devoid of sympathy, if your wife had signed the gift acknowledgement forms I sent to her. 3 times. I was busy, Slunna said weakly. The engagement party, the caterer. For 3 years. Uffala's eyebrow arched perfectly. You were busy for 3 years. Slunna shrank back into her chair. The past is irrelevant, I interrupted, keeping my eyes on Beckett. The question now is how we move forward. I have a proposal. They both leaned forward, a flicker of hope in their eyes. They thought I was going to capitulate. They thought I was going to say, let's forget this happened. Option 1, Uffala said, sliding a sheet of paper across the mahogany. You buy out Mrs. Sunkla's share. The house was appraised last month at $310,000. Her 35% share is valued at $108,500. You write a check today, we sign a quitclaim deed, and the house is yours. Slunna's face went chalk white. We don't have that kind of money, you know we don't. Option 2, Uffala continued, ignoring her. We file for a partition sale. The house goes on the market immediately. Given the current interest rates, it will likely sell for slightly under asking. After realtor fees, closing costs, and paying off the existing mortgage, the net proceeds will be split. You will receive your 65%, and Mrs. Sunkla will receive her 35%. We'd have to move, Beckett said, his voice trembling. Yes, I said. You would. You would take your portion, which Uffala estimates would be around $60,000 after the bank takes their cut, and find housing you can actually afford. That's not enough for a down payment in our neighborhood, Slunna protested, tears spilling over. We'd have to rent, we'd have to move to the Heights. The Heights is a perfectly respectable neighborhood, I said. It's where your father and I started, Beckett. What about option 3? Slunna asked desperately. Is there an option 3? There is no option 3, Uffala said, closing the folder. Those are your choices under the law. Beckett ran his hands through his hair. Mom, please, is there any way we can work out a payment plan? Maybe we could pay you monthly, like a mortgage, until we pay off the $108,000. I had been waiting for this. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. A loan, I mused. You want me to become your bank again. It would be formal this time, Beckett insisted. We'd sign papers. Beckett, I said, my voice dropping to a lower register. Why would I trust you with a 6-figure loan when you have already proven you cannot manage a simple household budget? You owe me $37,000 in emergency loans that you never intended to repay. You have maxed out credit cards. You are living in a fantasy world. That's not fair, Slunna sobbed. We're trying, life is expensive. Is it? I reached into my portfolio and pulled out the spreadsheet I had compiled the night before. I slid it across the table. Let's look at why life is so expensive for you. They looked down at the paper. It was a forensic dissection of their financial life. Your combined household income, I said, pointing to the top line, is $8,000 a month after taxes. That is a respectable sum. Most families could live very comfortably on that. I moved my finger down. Your monthly spending, however, averages $12,000. That can't be right, Beckett stammered. The numbers don't lie, Beckett. I do, or I did by covering the deficit for 3 years. I pointed to the red ink. Let's look at the necessities, shall we? I looked at Slunna. You spend $400 a month on dining out, not groceries, restaurants. We both work long hours, Slunna said defensively. Sometimes we're too tired to cook. You don't work at all, Slunna, I said. The air left the room. Beckett works long hours. You are a homemaker with no children, yet you have a housekeeper come twice a month. That's another $300. Slunna's face flushed a deep, ugly red. Let's continue, I said, relentless. $300 a month on a clothing budget for Slunna. $200 for premium cable and every streaming service known to man. $150 for an Equinox gym membership that, according to your check-ins, you use twice a month. $800 a month in minimum payments on credit cards that are maxed out from vacations you couldn't afford. Beckett was staring at the spreadsheet, his mouth slightly open. He was seeing it all laid out for the first time. The bleeding. Mom, I know it looks bad, he muttered. It looks like you are living a lifestyle that requires $150,000 a year when you barely make $100,000, I said. Do you think the money fairy was leaving cash under your pillow? It was me. I was the deficit funding, and I am resigning. So that's it. Slunna wiped her nose with her sleeve, abandoning all pretense of elegance. You're going to force us to sell. You're going to make us homeless to teach us a lesson. I am not making you homeless, I said. I am making you accountable. Uffala cleared her throat. However, she said, glancing at me, Mrs. Sunkla is willing to offer a conditional arrangement, a stay of execution, if you will. They both looked up, eyes wide. I have a counter-proposal, I said. I am willing to let you buy out my share, and I am willing to do it for $75,000 instead of the full $108,000. That is an immediate gift of over $30,000 in equity. We still don't have $75,000, Beckett said miserably. I know, but you can get a home equity loan for that amount, Uffala interjected. We've checked. Your credit is poor, but with the equity in the house, a predatory lender will touch you. The payments will be high. But, I raised a finger. I will only agree to sell you my share at that price if you agree to my conditions. All of them. They are non-negotiable. What conditions? Slunna asked suspiciously. Condition 1, I said, looking directly at her. Slunna gets a job, full-time, within 60 days, and you maintain employment for a minimum of 2 years. Slunna looked horrified. A job, but I have a degree in art history I can't just work at a Starbucks. You can and you might, I said. You are 39 years old. There is no reason you cannot contribute to the household income. If you want to live in a 2-income house, you need 2 incomes. Condition 2, I continued. You sell the Uddy. It's a luxury car with a luxury payment and premium gas. You buy a used, reliable vehicle and use the difference to pay down the credit card principal. Beckett flinched. He loved that car. Mom. Condition 3, I said, ignoring him. You stick to a strict budget. No restaurant meals. No premium cable. No gym memberships. You cook at home. You live within your means. How would you even monitor that? Beckett asked. Condition 4, Uffala said, tapping the table. Monthly financial audits. You will come here to this office on the 1st of every month. You will bring your bank statements, your pay stubs, and your credit reports. Uffala will review them. If you violate the budget, if I see a single charge for a $200 dinner or a designer purse, the deal is void. Void, Sloane whispered. The full amount of $108,000 becomes due immediately, I said. And if you can't pay it, we move to option 2, immediate sale of the house. The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear the hum of the building's HVAC system. That's like being in financial prison, Sloane said, her voice trembling with indignation. You're treating us like children. No, Sloane, I said softly. I am treating you like adults who have behaved like children. This is what adulthood looks like. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like work. It looks like paying your own way. We need a minute, Beckett said. He looked sick. Take 5, Ophelia said, checking her watch. I have a 3:00 p.m. They huddled in the corner of the office, whispering furiously. I saw Sloane crying, gesturing with her hands. I saw Beckett shaking his head, looking defeated. I saw them looking at the spreadsheet, then at me, then at the door. They realized there was no other door. 5 minutes later, they sat back down. We accept, Beckett said. His voice was flat. All the terms? I asked. All of them, Sloane whispered. She looked like she was swallowing broken glass. I'll start looking for a job tomorrow. Good, I said. Ophelia has the papers ready. Ophelia slid a thick stack of documents across the table. This is a binding legal agreement. It details the buyout price, the payment schedule, and the covenants regarding employment and budgeting. It also includes a confessed judgment clause, meaning if you default, we don't even have to go to trial to force the sale. Beckett picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. I watched my son sign his name, Beckett Sinclair. He passed the pen to Sloane. She hesitated, looking at the paper as if it were a death warrant for her social life, which, in a way, it was. She signed. Sloane Kensington Sinclair. Ophelia took the papers back, verified the signatures, and stamped them with her notary seal. Thump, thump. The sound was final. Congratulations, Ophelia said, devoid of irony. You just bought a house and a reality check. As they stood up to leave, Sloane paused. She looked at me, and for a second the entitlement was gone, replaced by genuine fear. Dorothy, Mom, she said, I know I hurt you, but we're family. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at her hand, resting on the back of the leather chair. I looked at her tear-stained face. Sloane, I said, gathering my purse. Family is supposed to count for something. That is exactly the point. And because you are family, I am not going to let you destroy yourselves anymore. I stood up. I'll see you on the 1st of the month. Don't be late. I walked out of the office first, leaving them standing in the shadow of the law, holding a folder full of obligations and a budget that would finally, hopefully, make them free. The first month was hell. There is no other way to describe it. It was a blistering, white-knuckled crash course in reality for two people who had spent their entire adult lives believing that consequences were things that happened to other people. 2 weeks into the agreement, my phone buzzed with a text from Beckett. Beckett * Mom, the hot water heater just died. The guy says it's $1,200 to replace. We literally don't have it. We've sold the Audi, but that money went straight to the credit card principal, like you said. Can we pause the payment plan for this month? Please. It's an emergency. I sat in my new apartment, a modest, sun-drenched 2-bedroom in a senior living community called The Willows, and stared at the screen. The old Madeline would have already been dialing her bank. The old Madeline would have worried about her son taking cold showers. The old Madeline would have fixed it. My thumb hovered over the keypad. My heart gave a familiar, painful squeeze. It's just water, *, I thought. It's basic sanitation. Then I looked at the spreadsheet Ophelia had printed out for me. The one that showed $400 a month previously spent on sushi dinners. I typed back, that sounds incredibly stressful, Beckett. I suggest you look into a payment plan with the plumber. Or perhaps sell the massive gaming computer I saw in the guest room. The payment plan with me stands. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Beckett, *, fine. That single word carried so much anger, but for the first time, it didn't carry my money. A week later, Genevieve Kensington knocked on my door. She looked different than she had at the hotel restaurant. She was wearing jeans, designer jeans, but jeans nonetheless, and carrying a bottle of Pinot Noir and a takeout bag of Thai food. I come bearing gifts, she said, stepping inside and looking around my apartment. And to escape. My husband's sister is visiting from Palm Springs and she's driving me to drink. We sat on my balcony, watching the sunset over the community garden. It was a peaceful evening, the kind I had learned to cherish. "How are the kids?" Genevieve asked, pouring us both a generous glass. "Struggling," I admitted. "Sloane got a job, did she tell you?" "She did, receptionist at a dental office in the strip mall." Genevieve shook her head, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "She called me crying after the first day, said her feet hurt, said the patients were rude." "What did you say?" "I told her to buy comfortable shoes," Genevieve said. She took a sip of wine, then reached into her purse. She pulled out an envelope ripped in half. "What is that?" "This," Genevieve said, holding up the torn paper, "was a check for $25,000. It was from Richard's life insurance policy. I had it earmarked for Sloane's birthday next month." I looked at the jagged edges of the paper. "She called me yesterday," Genevieve continued, "begging, saying you were being a tyrant, saying they were eating ramen noodles. She played the victim so well, Madeline, just like her father used to teach her." And I almost caved. I had the pen in my hand. I was going to mail this to her to pay off your ransom, as she calls it. Genevieve tossed the torn pieces onto the patio table. "But then I remembered what you said about the best gift being the truth, so I tore it up. I told her that her inheritance is currently being invested in her character development." I raised my glass. "To character development." "To tough love," Genevieve replied, clinking her glass against mine. "God, it hurts though, doesn't it?" "Like a severed limb," I agreed. "But the bleeding has to stop eventually." The turning point didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a phone call, exactly 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days after the wedding that wasn't. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was volunteering at the community library, shelving paperbacks, when my phone rang. "Sloane." I hesitated. Our monthly meetings at Ophelia's office had been frigid affairs. Sloane usually sat with her arms crossed, presenting her pay stubs like they were evidence of a crime committed against her. She had lost weight. She looked tired, but the debt was going down. The graph on Ophelia's computer was a steady, downward slope. I answered the phone. "Hello, Sloane." "Dorothy, I mean Madeline." Her voice sounded breathless. "Yes, is everything all right? Is it the house?" "No, the house is fine. The budget is, well, it's on track." She paused, and I heard a sound I hadn't heard in years. She was laughing, not the plastic socialite titter, but a real, incredulous laugh. I had to tell someone I got promoted." I blinked, leaning against the mystery section. "You did?" "Yeah, the office manager quit suddenly, and Dr. Evans. He offered me the job. He said I was the most organized person in the office. He said I handled the difficult patients better than anyone." That is wonderful news, Sloane," I said, and I meant it. "Truly." "It comes with a raise," she said, the words tumbling out fast. $4 an hour more, and benefits, real benefits. We can increase the monthly payment to you. We can shave 3 months off the timeline." "That's smart," I said. "Very responsible." There was a long silence on the other end. The background noise of the dental office faded away. "Madeline," Sloane's voice dropped, losing its manic energy. "I'm here." "I owe you an apology," she said. I braced myself. I expected the usual. "I'm sorry I yelled," or "I'm sorry about the wedding." "I'm listening." "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know how hard it was to make $100. I used to spend that on a lunch and not even think about it. And now, I stand on my feet for 9 hours a day, and I deal with people yelling at me about copays, and at the end of the day, I look at that $100, and I think about how much work went into it." She took a shaky breath. "And then I think about the check for $87,000 you wrote us, and the $14,000 for the wedding, and I realize that wasn't just paper. That was your life. That was your time, and I treated it like trash." I felt a lump form in my throat. This was it. This was the moment. "You were entitled," I said softly. "I was worse than entitled," she said. "I was a parasite, and I was cruel to the host." A pause. "Beckett is," He's getting there, he's tired, he misses the car. But last night we cooked dinner, actual spaghetti, not takeout, and we talked. Real talking, not just staring at our phones. He said he respects you. He said you were the only one brave enough to stop us. I took off my glasses, wiping a sudden tear from the corner of my eye. Thank you for telling me that, Sloane. Would you, she hesitated, her confidence faltering. Would you want to get lunch? Maybe on Sunday? My treat. I mean, literally my treat. I have a coupon for the Olive Garden, but I can pay. I smiled. The old Dorothy would have said yes immediately, desperate to rush back in and smooth everything over. But I wasn't that woman anymore. And Sloane wasn't the same girl. We were building something new. I would like that, I said. But let's meet at the Panera on 4th Street. It's halfway between us. Okay, she said, sounding relieved. Panera is good. I'll see you Sunday. Lunch was nice. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences. Beckett looked older, his hairline receding slightly, his hands rougher from doing his own yard work. Sloane wore less makeup, and her nails were short and unpolished. But they were real. When the check came, my hand instinctively twitched toward my purse. No, Beckett said firmly, placing his hand over the bill. I've got it, Mom. It's $42, Beckett, I warned. Is that in the entertainment budget? It is, he said, pulling out a debit card, not a credit card. We budgeted for this 2 weeks ago. Lunch with Mom. I sat back and watched my son pay for my meal for the first time in his adult life. He didn't look resentful. He looked proud. As we walked out to the parking lot, Sloane hugged me. It wasn't the stiff, A-frame hug of the past. It was a squeeze. We're going to pay you off early, she promised. I'm picking up Saturday shifts. Don't burn yourself out, I said. Balance is part of the lesson, too. We'll be okay, Beckett said, putting his arm around his wife. They walked toward their car, a used Honda Civic that had seen better days but was clean and debt-free. I watched them go. They looked like a couple who were tired, yes, but they also looked like a team. They were climbing a mountain, but they were climbing it together, without me carrying them on my back. The sun was setting over the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting long, purple shadows across the trail. The air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. I adjusted the straps of my backpack and took a deep breath. At 68 years old, I was in the best shape of my life. My calves burned in a good way. My mind was clear. You keeping up back there, Maddie? I turned to see Elias coming up the switchback behind me. He was 71, a retired history professor with a beard like Hemingway and a laugh that shook the birds from the trees. We had met at the community book club 3 months ago when we both reached for the last copy of a murder mystery. I'm waiting on you, old man, I teased. He caught up to me, grinning, and handed me his water bottle. The view from the top is supposed to be spectacular. I bet it is. I looked out over the valley. Somewhere down there in the grid of the city, my son and daughter-in-law were probably sitting down to a budget dinner. They were likely stressed. They were working hard. They were struggling. And that was okay. For 3 years, I had thought love meant protection. I thought it meant cushioning every fall, smoothing every edge, being the safety net that never failed. But I had been wrong. The safety net hadn't saved them. It had trapped them. It had kept them suspended in a state of permanent adolescence, unable to touch the ground and learn how to stand. When I finally pulled the net away, they fell. They crashed hard. There were tears and bruises and broken egos. But then, miraculously, they stood up. I looked at Elias, who was pointing out a hawk circling the thermals. He didn't know about the $124,000. He didn't know about the wedding disaster. He just knew me as Madeline, the woman who liked spicy food, hated split infinitives, and could hike 5 miles without complaining. He valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. And that feeling was worth more than every dollar I had ever signed away. Ready to finish this? Elias asked, offering me his hand. I looked at his hand, weathered, warm, inviting. Then I looked at the trail ahead, steep, rocky, but manageable. I'm ready, I said. I took his hand, but I didn't lean on it. I used it for balance, just for a moment, and then I stepped forward on my own 2 feet, climbing higher into the golden light. I had given my family the gift of disappearance, and in doing so, I had finally found myself,